Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is Ciara from Ciara T Designs, and today I have this really fun mixed media Halloween card to share with you. So let's jump right in. So I am going to use my Betterpress for this. I have that really pretty spiderweb background plate, and I'm just kind of adhering my Betterpress cardstock. This is that cotton cardstock that comes with the Betterpress. I'm going to use that just kind of adhered in the center with a piece of tape because this plate is the whole front of an A2 card. So I didn't want to have any tape on it. Although I do end up trimming this down, I chose to use the extra pieces on the inside of the card. So I didn't want any tape marks to kind of end up messing up my impression from this plate. Because if you have not heard of the Betterpress system, it presses into your cardstock as well as inks. So you get kind of a twofer. You get texture and you get inking. So if you wanted a more subtle look, you could absolutely not ink it and just use the texture that it would give you. But I want the ink and the texture, so I'm going to use both. So I'm going to run through this through my Big Shot. It does work in the Big Shot. It is suggested you use a manual machine, and of course Spellbinders has the platinum machines. I don't own that. I have my Big Shot, so that's what I use, and it works perfectly fine for me. I've had no issues, so I just keep kind of using it. And then there is that background. Sadly, it's a little difficult to tell the texture of the plate from camera. In person, it's phenomenal, but in the video, it kind of just looks like it's inked the background, which it has done. You just can't really see the texture. So be aware that there is a good amount of texture there too. It's just a little bit difficult to see. So I did cut down some cardstock because you know, guys, I love to matte my images with black cardstock. I just find that it helps the colors to pop. And when I'm working with some vibrant colors, I really love it to kind of just help them even pop more against the background because I love that vibrant color. So I cut my black matte to be about an 1/8 of an inch smaller than my A2 base. And then I cut down that spiderweb back piece to be about an 1/8 of an inch smaller than the matte that I've cut. So it ends up being about an inch smaller than the 1/4 of an inch, smaller than the background. And then here I brought in Edison. Edison is a Tim Holtz die. He cuts out this beautiful pumpkin, and my die slipped. Now that's on me. There's nothing wrong with my machine or anything like that. It's just that because I haven't been taping them down, they do like to move a little bit when they run through the machine. So I'm just going to re-die cut the face piece, because that's the top piece, and the little stem that didn't quite cut through, and then I ripped it trying to get it out. So I'm just going to run those back through again. And I also am going to run through the other piece of the pumpkin just because he didn't quite cut those delicate lines out the first time. So I'm going to cut it again just because I didn't want to fight with trying to get those, like the thin lines to cut out. There's just one area on the bottom that didn't quite cut. So I just easily set that back into the die, and then I'm going to run it back through my switch, which is just off to the left of the screen there. Yeah, it's just easier for me. And sometimes the magic mat, it's part of that, right? Because it does warp a little. So every once in a while, there's just an area that doesn't cut great. However, I still prefer it over my plastic plates just because it doesn't have to be replaced half as often. Once it starts to warp a bit, you can actually just heat it up a bit and then it lays back down and you have no issues. So I don't really mind needing to run a die through more than once if I have to. That doesn't bother me any. But if it does, then you'd be better to have the plastic plates because they give a more consistent pressure. But I don't really mind, so I just kind of use the mat because I prefer not having to replace my plates consistently. But yeah, so that's kind of my thought there. And this is a great colorized die if you've been eyeing Tim Holtz colorized dies but been a little leery of them because some of them have a lot of pieces. This one does not. It has 3. Well, 5 if you count the stem, sorry. So it has 3 pieces for the actual pumpkin and then 2 pieces that go on the stem to add some extra layers and color if you want to. I chose to leave the stem white because I liked how that looked, but you of course could cut it out of any color you want to or ink blend on it like I'm going to do here. So for my ink blending, I'm going to do every layer of the pumpkins the same 2 colors, just because I thought that would look really fun on the card. So this is my huge pop of color is going to be the pumpkin. So I really, really wanted him to be very vibrant. So I chose to do carved pumpkin on the bottom portion of the pumpkin. And then I'm going to bring in picked raspberry on the top and then kind of blend them in the center. I chose to use blending brushes for this just because I was a little concerned with grabbing those thin areas and kind of pulling them. I find with my blending domes, that kind of happens sometimes if I have more delicate areas. So I do tend towards the brushes just because they're a little more gentle. But you could absolutely do this with blending foams. Just be more aware and just be a little more careful. And I chose to leave the stem white, as I said here. It doesn't matter that I'll get a little bit of pink on top of it because the next layer pretty well covers the stem base. So though it got a little bit of pink on it, you won't be able to tell once we start to put it together. And I'm just going to use the same two colors, and that first layer I did is the very base layer. This layer here now is the second layer to it. So you get a little more of the actual like Edison, the more of the face and more interest. And then that top layer kind of gives you even more interest in like the shape of the pumpkin. So you get kind of more of a pumpkin look. This is a really fun colorized die. I'm really glad that I picked it up. I only just picked it up. This came out with the Halloween dies, and you guys know the Christmas dies are already out. So I just picked him up because I couldn't resist. He was just so cute. And I ignored him the first time around because I told myself I didn't need him, but then I couldn't resist, so I picked him up anyways. And then I added a little extra sparkle because you guys know that I love to add bling to my cards, and this card is no exception. I got a little excited by this card and added a bunch of extra bling on it. So you don't have to be as heavy-handed as I am. I just really love the look, so I kind of tend towards very shiny things. But completely up to you. You don't need to add as much sparkle as I did. And I did also add some perfect pearls just onto that background piece so that it would kind of tie together and look very cohesive. And then I also brought out my Oxide sprays and just kind of splashed a little bit of the two colors on top. You don't need to do this, and you could use your ink pads if you wanted to, just squish them down on the mat and then kind of splash them onto the background. I didn't do that because I have the sprays and they're just a little more vibrant, but you absolutely can. This is just, I own the sprays, so why not use them? Because it's just an easier way to get a more vibrant color, because when you use the ink pad and swish it, you have to add water to make it liquid. So it does end up, first of all, oxidizing the color, and second of all, kind of ends up making it a little bit more muted, which, I mean, if you are like me and love vibrant colors, this is kind of more that way. So I just chose to do it like that, but there's no wrong way to do this. It's just preference and what you have on hand. So then I did adhere my layers of Edison together. I pondered putting in foam tape between each layer and giving him more dimension, but in the end, I chose to just add foam tape behind him to give him more dimension in that way instead. You could add foam tape between each layer, and that would give you a lot of really interesting dimension, but it would be a little finicky to cut the pieces out for that. So completely up to you and what look you're going for. I just chose to make him flat, and then I'm going to add some foam tape afterwards when we actually start adhering things together, because that's just kind of how I prefer it. So I'm going to adhere all my layers together here and kind of start building my design. I didn't originally know what I wanted Edison to be sitting on, so I kind of pondered a few different things. In the end, I decided to go with some mummy cloth that I had had on hand for a long time. This is an old one of Tim Holtz mummy cloth. It even still comes with like the black twine in the container. I don't think you can buy this exact one anymore. I think the mummy cloth just comes as mummy cloth by itself now, but this one has some black card or black string, I guess it is, in it. And we're going to do that here in a second. I'm just going to show you where I chose to heat emboss two sentiments. They both say Happy Halloween. They are from the Spellbinders Gnome Drive sentiment set. You guys saw me using a couple of other cards. I just really like this font and thought it would be kind of fun on this card. So I chose to stamp out two of them so that I could put one on the inside of the card and one on the front of the card. So you just kind of have that kind of tied together, because I wanted to use the spider web that I cut off of the front panel inside the card so I didn't waste it. And I'll show you guys that at the end. I didn't really record doing the inside of the card, but you will get to see it once we're kind of finished all the other steps here. So I brought in my trimmer and I just eyeballed trimming these out as little labels. There's no rhyme or reason for this. You guys have, if you've been with me for a while, you know that I kind of just like to wing things. You absolutely can measure things if that's your preference. It might take a smidge longer than what I'm doing, but completely up to you. But at the end of the day, this is a handmade card and it will never be perfect. So I don't aim for that. I kind of just aim for something that makes me happy, that I think someone would love to receive. And then that's kind of what I go for. So But completely up to you as to what makes you more comfortable. So for the mummy cloth, at first I kind of thought maybe I'd layer it on top and have it look a little pretty. And in the end, I chose to just crumple it up in my hand and just lay it down how I thought looked neat. I didn't like the really perfect line with it. It kind of took away from the mummy cloth being this interesting texture. Like here, like I could have laid it like this and it was kind of perfect, and I was kind of like, I don't like that. So I'm going to scrap that and just crumple it all up in my hand. Here you see and I roll it all around and I just kind of lay it down, and however it lays, that's what we're going with, because it just really gave me a more interesting texture and a little bit more of a interesting shape. Like it's not conforming to any specific way. And I loved how that looked, and I thought it just added a lot more whimsy to this already fairly whimsical card. So that's kind of what I was thinking with it. And I just put a little bit of glue behind it and pressed it down into the space there so that it would fill where I needed it to be glued. And then I'm going to bring in my Big Mama foam tape. And this is where I'm going to add that extra dimension to Edison. So I chose, this is the only part of this that's going to be raised up a little bit. But I think that it really adds something to it because you just get a little more interest and texture in it. But of course, again, completely up to you. You can adhere Edison flat and that would still look wonderful. I have a tendency towards dimension, so I kind of like to add it. But it's whatever supplies you have on hand and whatever you kind of prefer, by all means, go with that. And then I'm going to just make sure that there's none of the adhesive hanging off the edges of Edison. And then I'm going to kind of bring in my sentiment and work on my layering and how I want this to look. So I chose to have the sentiment hang off the edge. It lines up perfectly with the card front, so it doesn't hang off and I don't need to trim it down anymore. But it just kind of great, like lovely sits there and doesn't do anything that's kind of weird off the edge of the card, so I don't have to cut it down more than I already have, which I love. I love when stuff fits perfectly like that. And then I'm going to put on Edison just slightly above everything so that he can kind of be nestled into that mummy cloth that I've added on the bottom there. And I kind of thought that I was almost done at this point. I am going to add a couple of sequins. They're stars. I call them sequins. They're not really. They're just like star embellishments. They're holographic. They're stunning. I love them so much. And I thought they really fit with this more whimsical Halloween vibe. But then because I cannot stop myself and I love everything shiny, I decided I wanted to add some mica flakes over top of the mummy cloth, but below the pumpkin. So you're going to see that here in a second. And again, by no means do you need to add these things. I do because I love glitter and shine and shimmer. But if that's not your jam, don't add it. Like at this point, he can be done. It's just that I love sparkle and I don't get to use my mica flakes as often as I'd like to. I should use them more because I love them, but I don't use them a lot. So I thought this would be a really fun way to add some extra interest and whimsy to this card, and still kind of have it feel very fun. I don't know. You guys will have to tell me what you think of how this card came together, because I'm always interested in your thoughts, and what you would change if you do something slightly different than what I did. But I had a blast with this card. This card makes me so incredibly happy. It makes me smile every time I look at it. I love it so much. I don't know if I'm going to be able to part with it. Do you guys ever do that? Do you create a card and then you're like, I like this too much that I'm never going to send it to anybody? This is one of those cards for me. I love how it turned out and I'm so excited by it. So currently it's sitting on my desk and I just admire it when I wander by, but I'm quite enamored with how that card turned out. But yeah, so that is the card I made for you guys today. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you leave me a like, leave me a comment, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I would love to see you again, and I do new videos every Monday and Thursday. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you again very soon. Bye-bye for now.